I've used ChatGPT and I've used Grammarly. I've even run my own writing through AI detectors, but nothing truly transformed my writing until I started using Walter Wright's AI. Let me show you how I use this tool to perfect my writing, learn while I'm doing it, and get better grades. Every time I use AI in my writing, it just feels kinda not like me. It sounds like a robot, and that makes sense. And even when it goes through AI detectors and doesn't get flagged, it still just doesn't sound like my writing. I needed help, but I also want to get better at writing at the same time, and that's where Walter Wright's AI comes in. All right, my friends, today we have an essay on the macroeconomic effects of the Vietnam War. So, what we're going to do today is look at how Walter Wright's AI can improve this essay. So I will copy this, and we already are here. We can humanize this AI text and then paste in my essay. I'm going to switch this to an academic paper and then click humanize and scan. All right, there we go. And now we can compare these two side by side and see what changes were made. One thing that I noticed right away was that this essay, because I chose to write in the academic setting, I think it sounds a little more refined and uses some more precise words and a little bit more, I don't want to say it just uses big words to sound fancy, but I think it uses those big words specifically to drive home the point. Because you're in that academic setting, that is something that makes a little more sense than just in a general paper when you're trying to reach anybody. That came to my attention right away. Secondly, we just have some improvements in the transitions here. One of the starkest immediate economic impacts right here. This one just says one of the most immediate economic impacts. That sort of illustrates that same thing where it's using a little bit more refined language because I chose that academic setting. And once again, this sort of goes to show how Walter Wright's AI isn't just going to improve your writing. It sort of teaches you as you go. I know what starkest means, but I don't think to use words like that in my writing. But when I add these to my vocabulary and start to use them more often, it definitely can improve my writing as I'm going along. So let's find a few more differences here. The U.S. government poured billions of dollars into military operations, equipment, and support, largely funded through deficit spending rather than increased taxation. Then over here, the U.S. government spent billions on military operations, equipment, and support, mostly funded with deficit spending, not new taxes. So it really switched around the end of that sentence there to shorten it a little bit, make it flow a lot better. And I like that idea because this one over here, this last part says largely funded through deficit spending rather than increased taxation, when this one really cuts that down, just saying mostly funded with deficit spending, not new taxes. And I think the sentence structure is a little bit more complex on this side here, written by Walter Wright's AI, because I chose that academic setting and also because it sounds better with its tone and flow, a little bit more like something I would personally say. But that just goes to show how knowing these writing conventions can really help improve your essays, and that's where Walter Wright's AI really comes in and makes the writing a lot better. So let's continue on here. This created a classic guns versus butter dilemma, where resources were diverted from domestic programs to support the war effort. So once again, that's circling back to this deficit spending idea, where they're diverting their money away from such programs. This generated a classic guns versus butter dilemma, as money was transferred from domestic programs to fund the war effort. So here, I think this one kind of simplified some things, made it sound a little more human. I wouldn't personally say diverted from domestic programs to support the war effort. The idea of funding is much more what the government's role actually is in that situation. It is their job to support and fund the war effort, but I think funding sort of ties back into this deficit spending idea, while supporting kind of sounds like extra that may come from these new taxes, which aren't actually happening. So this one's just a little bit more precise in that language. Then we'll just take a look at this last sentence. Its legacy underscores the broader economic risks of prolonged military conflict. Then over here we have its legacy highlights the greater economic dangers of prolonged military conflict. So I like how this uses the word dangers instead of risks, because we were just highlighting a lot of those dangers, which risks is more of a future-based thing, and I consider dangers would be more of like a now we have to worry about this. So this rising inflation, rising public debt, and long-term changes to policy are sort of the more present dangers, when the risks in the future are more the consequences of that. So I like the word choice here, and I just like the idea of the legacy highlights rather than the legacy underscores. That's a nicer word choice there as well. So this just goes to show Walter Wright's AI is not only improving this writing and avoiding AI detection, it's also just coaching me along the way, because there are so many words that you choose, and then when you go into Walter Wright's AI, you're like, I see why they changed that, because that makes a lot more sense. It really ties in nicer to what I was talking about, and it makes things simpler and easier to understand when you're finally reading over this for the final time. So that really goes to turn this paragraph here, or this essay here, into one more complete and cohesive paragraph over here. And I have been greatly coached by Walter Wright's AI. And even though it's going to rewrite these, it still is my work, yet it's teaching me along the way, just like a tutor would, on how to use, better tone, better flow, better word choice, and all those things along the way. If you want to sound more human, bypass these AI detectors, and get better at writing all at the same time, Walter Wright's AI is the perfect study tool for you. Best of all, you can try it for free today. Go to walterwrights.ai and try a free 300-word sample to get started.